Hey friends, this is Sarah.
And this is Ashley. And today I'm bringing you a story of Maureen Brubaker-Farley on our first episode of Hometown Homicide. We finally have our first episode.
Yay!
And I am going to tell you about Maureen Brubaker-Farley. Now, this is going to be a case that had been cold for 50 years until 2021. It is now a solved case. But let's get into it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Are you ready for some true crime? Perfect.
I really thought you were going to say, are you ready to rumble? I'm like, that is not the vibe we've got.
No, not today. Maureen Brubaker was born July 4th, 1954, to the parents of David and Mary Ann Brubaker of Sioux City, Iowa. She was described as being a firecracker, also, since, she was born on the 4th of July.
Oh, fun.
By her mother in an interview back in 2010 for Who TV, Channel 13. Also described as she was just super special and always wanted to grow up really fast. So she was the oldest of 7 siblings, and she would often babysit for her parents, and then the children would be rewarded 10 cents for minding Maureen. Okay. So, if they did what she said, she would give them 10 cents each.
Back then,
I was going to say 10 cents.
That was something back then.
Went a long way.
Yeah.
And then what they would do is they would go down to the dime store and buy candy cigarettes. And I laughed at this because I remember back in the day, growing up, we would camp. And every place we camped always had, a candy store. And we always get candy cigarettes.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
But we would burn the end of them to make it. It was, we were stupid. But anyways, and then even if there was a little tip that they would get into, Maureen, she would just always praise her younger siblings and tell her parents that they minded her, so they would get their 10 cents.
Oh, well, that's sweet.
Yeah. And then didn't really find anything else besides that of her growing up. Just what I found about Maureen. But when she was 17, so in 1971, she married David Farley.
She was 17?
She was 17.
Okay.
In 1971, you get married young, I think.
I mean, yeah, they did that too.
But she ended up moving to Cedar Rapids because David was serving a little stint in the Anamosa State Penitentiary. I know. I've been there. I mean, not as a... It is a men's reformatory, but...
She's not been there.
I have toured the place. I'm from there.
Yes.
It is very interesting inside. But anyway, so she moved to Cedar Rapids to be close to him while he did his little stint.
What was he there for?
It did not say what he was, and I didn't look up really much about him because he's really not part of this whole
I was just curious.
case. Obviously, he wasn't a suspect because he was locked up.
True.
So, yeah, didn't really look into much about her husband. So she rented a room in Cedar Rapids, and then she waitressed at, I think it's Wida's restaurant. So I did look it up. It is, because I've never heard of it, it's Riley's now on First Avenue.
Oh, I was gonna
So
say,
it's like
I
in
imagine
that
it's something else by now. So.
area, where Riley's is
Moose and stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
And then while she was living in Cedar Rapids, she missed her family terribly. She would send them pictures, and then she would call any chance that she had, even though I guess back then calling was really expensive.
Oh, long distance, I suppose.
Yeah.
Kids, you take things for granted nowadays.
We all do.
I mean, yeah, we do.
We really do. Ugh. So, on the early morning of Friday, September 17th, she borrowed money to buy a pack of cigarettes because she had not been paid yet, and she was going to pick up her paycheck later that day, but she never made it to pick up her paycheck that day. And then from what it sounds like, Maureen was pretty reliable. So with her job, so when she didn't show up for work Monday, so Friday was really the last time she was seen from borrowing that money, buying a pack of cigarettes, didn't show up Monday, the 20th. That's when she was reported missing from her employer. And then they went and searched the room where she rented. They didn't really call it an apartment, they called it a sleeping room. So I don't know if that was a thing back then. When they searched that room, they did find the pack of cigarettes, and her car was parked out back, and it had a full tank of gas.
Interesting.
And then 4 days later, on Friday, September 25th, around or between 5 and 5:30 p.m., Kevin Copus, who was 15, and Danny Lineweaver, I could have typed that wrong as well, who was 14, they were headed up Ely Road, which is southwest Cedar Rapids, to go hunting. And they noticed a junk car in the ravine, which they did not see previously because there's a lot of trees and
foliage.
Yep, that's the word. But so they didn't see it previously. They then saw what looked like a sleeping lady on the trunk of the car.
On the trunk of the car?
Yep, so it was an old junk car parked, and they see this, what looked like a sleeping lady. Her leg was propped up, and her body was laying against the back of the window on her back.
Oh, okay.
She wasn't wearing any shoes, but she was fully clothed. Fully clothed. Since they thought she was just sleeping and didn't want to wake her, they just went on their way to go hunt. So once they reached Highway 30, which is too close to hunt, they just decided to turn around and go back. So once they made, on their way back down Ely Road, they approached the car again, and she was still there in the same position. So this time, Danny and Kevin decided to investigate this time. They wanted to get a little bit closer, take a closer look. And that's when they discovered that the sleeping lady was not sleeping. So they saw the discoloration of her body. Ugh. So this freaked them out. I mean, at 14,
right.
Finding something like that,
yeah,
they freaked out. And they started running down the road. And then they almost stopped at a tavern to get help, but since they did have guns because they were going out hunting, they just didn't want to get in trouble. They went down and headed back to Danny's house. So they told Danny's mom what they saw, but she did not believe them.
That sucks.
I mean...
Yeah, I know.
Well,
Kids
so she goes, I don't believe you, so take me there.
Oh.
I want to see what you saw. And then around 6:40 that evening, they arrived back at the junk car. And Danny's mom also saw what looked like the woman sleeping atop the car in the ravine. They then went to a nearby farmhouse and called the police. And then once the police arrived and secured the scene, they removed Maureen's body and took her to a local hospital for an autopsy. Investigators first thought Maureen was thrown from a passing vehicle and passed through the heavy vegetation and onto the car's trunk.
And just landed like she was
And then landed
chilling.
like she did. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Totally.
so they thought she was thrown. But didn't rule out that she could have been placed there. And then a few days later, on the 27th of September, the Cedar Rapids police issued a public plea for anyone with information to come forward with what they knew. And then according to the Cedar Rapids Gazette, it was an article from September 29th, 1971, Cedar Rapids Police Chief Kenneth Vanus said they believe Maureen's death took place other than where she was found, and they were incredibly interested in Maureen's actions from the last day she was seen alive. They also thought she maybe have left town, because they said if she would have been in town, she would have picked up her paycheck. But obviously, she didn't pick up her paycheck because she was
But obviously, if she was going to leave town, why wouldn't pick up
her paycheck before,
but also take your own car that has a full tank of gas?
Yeah, what?
Or the cigarettes that you needed to borrow money from someone to even buy? I mean, logically.
Yeah, so reading that, I was just like, they just thought she was out of town because she didn't pick up her paycheck. That didn't make sense. So back to Maureen, there were no indication of defense wounds. That came from the assistant chief, and her clothes were somewhat disarray, but were not torn. She had a blunt trauma to the side of her head, which indicated a surprise attack. It also came from her autopsy. We'll get to that here in a second. So in that same article from the Gazette, there were several missing items from Maureen's room that she was renting. And per their investigation, she never went anywhere without her purse, which was one of the items missing.
Okay.
Her purse had her fake ID. I mean, it to show that she was 21, because she was 17.
Right.
I mean, yes, she was married, but she wasn't 21 yet. She probably needed that ID to buy her cigarettes. And then also had her social security card, rent receipts, makeup, some family pictures, and a picture of a Marine in uniform. I don't know who the Marine was, but she had a picture of a Marine in uniform.
Interesting.
Also in her purse was a leather wallet with red velvet lining that her husband David made while he was in Anamosa State Penitentiary.
Arts and crafts time in prison. Okay.
Yep. Normally...
Let's say it sounds fancy, leather and red velvet. I'm like, oh, and made in prison.
Made in prison. Also in Anamosa, they make license plates for us here in Iowa.
Do they still do that, though?
Yes. I mean, last time I took a tour, yes, they did. Yep.
Somebody's got to do it.
Right? And then when they found Maureen, her shoes were missing. And that is like, they really talked about her shoes were missing. Because she was fully clothed, but her shoes were missing. But her feet were clean, which means she was not barefoot when she died.
Right.
The assistant chief made it very, very clear that if any of her missing items were found, they were to report it to the police. Okay, so Maureen's autopsy was completed and showed no signs of alcohol in her blood, which left officials wondering what happened that morning. Clearly, I mean, she's dead, so should be thinking about that before. The Lake County Medical Examiner ruled Maureen had been dead no less than 48 hours and no more than 96 hours, and cause of death was a massive blow to the right side of her head, causing a basal skull fracture. It was also confirmed
that right side of her head?
Yes.
Okay.
And she'd also been sexually assaulted.
But fully clothed.
Disarray.
Right. I mean, yeah, you could have shimmied it back on or whatnot, but...
Okay. So, her case, like, that is what I found from articles, all basically saying the same thing about her death. Now, her case had remained unsolved and left, like, no answers for her family for 50 years. Now, they had tried to do... because back then, there was no DNA. Yeah. Like, none.
That wasn't a thought.
They had tried in 2013, I believe, some DNA testing, which there were a lot of suspects. But finally, this year in 2021, through investigation DNA technology, the Cedar Rapids Police Department Cold Case Unit identified and confirmed George M. Smith as a suspect in Maureen's death 50 years later. So the case is closed with no prosecution because unfortunately George did die in 2013 at the age of 94.
Holy jeez.
So he got to live a full life.
Okay, wait. He died in what?
2013.
13. I'm stupid. 13. And it happened... So he would have been like, what, 50-something when he did this?
I mean,
not that
I'm
they
not
can't.
doing math.
I was just like, well, crap, if this happened how long ago? And I mean, obviously he was old.
I mean, he got to live a full life.
Yeah, which is...
Now, George was interviewed back in...
Really?
1971. And officer reports showed that he had gone to the police department multiple times in the month after Maureen's death murder to ask about the progress and in the investigation, how it was going. But there was not, like, there wasn't even enough evidence to charge him or any suspect back then. Of all the suspects they had, they did not have enough to charge anybody. That's why it was left cold. Now, it says that George worked at a liquor store next to where Maureen rented her room. And multiple people identified him as an acquaintance of Maureen's from the diner that she worked at.
So she probably wouldn't have felt too threatened since she'd seen him before.
So apparently he had gone in there multiple times, knew where she lived.
Right.
Because her car was still at home. Even Maureen's mother suspected George was responsible and even wrote to the police months after her daughter's death. So DNA technology, like we said, wasn't a thing at the time of her killing to confirm that he was in fact the killer. Even now, her family have answers, and they're relieved to have, a little bit of closure. They're angry that her killer died before getting the justice that he deserved. That's what they told Fox News anyways. But, so yeah, exciting. I mean, that technology was able to bring not justice, but closure to a 50-year-old cold case. But yeah, that's my story of Maureen Brubaker-Farley. She's beautiful. I mean, she was beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Which we can attach or on our Instagram, I should say, put her picture up and, a few others.
But her siblings, missed her so much, apparently, when she moved to Cedar Rapids. And even now, they're like, we wish, how would she be today? She also, there's a Facebook page, remembering Maureen Brubaker, and they post on there a lot, wishing her happy birthday, you would have been, 67 this year. And it's just kind of, what would she be like today? And George Smith took that away from her. Not that we really need to know anything more about him, because
Right.
I don't care about him.
Right. I just found it intriguing when you said she was hit on the right side of the head, although if he came up behind her and was, just since more normal people or typical people are right-handed.
Well, if he was behind her.
Yeah, he could smack her on the right side from behind. And yeah, I guess I don't know how liquor stores were then, but liquor stores now, you can get liquor and cigarettes, so if maybe that's where she had went over there to buy them, and maybe he followed her home or waited for her to come out or something, since the cigarettes were inside the apartment or room.
And we'll never know, since he obviously took that to his grave of what happened that day on September 17th, 1871. He literally took that to the grave.
He never had married or kids or anything that would have any
I
clue
didn't
of
look.
anything.
I just read what they
cold
put,
case
the
put
cold
up.
case. I didn't
Gotcha.
read about him. I don't care about him. He took someone's life.
I just didn't know if there was maybe some sort of he mentioned it to a wife at some point or whatnot, or if he was just that much of a shitbag that he.
But they, when they did the DNA testing, it ruled out 15 other suspects. And obviously, since it only left George as the final one, but he was dead. So they had to actually get a warrant of one of his relatives to get the DNA. And that's how it confirmed it was his, because the DNA was similar to his, to the relatives.
The familial DNA
Yes.
stuff.
So that's how they were able to find that, but yeah. I think it was September, October 2021, they finally confirmed Maureen's killer.
Well, good's not the right word, but you know what I mean. I'm surprised there wasn't more of a hubbub about this case as, the Michelle Martinko. There was such a big deal about that.
That was a huge deal.
And, I only saw one post of this at one point just because I remember the picture of the guy.
Yeah, and I found, thank you, iowacoldcases.org as well. You
Excellent website.
literally have so many links to go research these, and whoever runs this, I don't know if it's Jody Ewing, but thank you. But yeah, I went to iowacoldcases.org and it popped up as update, case closed. I'm like, So I started reading into it, and I was like, that's what I'm going to do for my first one.
Good job, Ashley. Everybody.
Thank you.
Give her a round of applause. And we didn't even get disrupted by a cat.
No, she's sleeping. Our studio audience is asleep at the moment.
I am not as prepared as I wanted to be, so we can't record our second one tonight, but maybe tomorrow when Ashley's off work, otherwise sometime this week, and we'll get it out soon.
So, we will try to have a schedule of release episodes Monday at 9 a.m.
Sure.
But yeah, that is Hometown Homicide, and this was not my hometown, but mentioned my hometown, so I also live in Cedar Rapids.
Yeah.
So
It's
interesting because I had no idea about this, and literally happened a few miles away from me. So
right. Lots of bizarre things that you don't know that happen in your hometown. So again, we want to tell stories to you, not about you. So stay safe.
and this has been Hometown Homicide.